Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote-unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp. And those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
Did your last vacation house for the whole crew leave you wishing there was a better way to stay together? Like with bedrooms that are all great, so everyone thinks they got the best room?
Whoa! This is amazing.
A full bathroom in every bedroom?
Hey, mine's got a bathroom.
A beach around an epic, clear bay big enough for swimming, rope swinging, and even kayaking? All next door to Walt Disney World? Next trip, share a house at Evermore Orlando Resort. You won't believe what you resorted to before.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
The world is coming to Canada. This weekend, the G7 summit kicks off in Kananaskis, Alberta, bringing together world leaders along with thousands of their staff and traveling media. It's a meeting that could see drama, but also significant action to deal with global war, tensions, and trade. Canada's hosting for the first time since the 2018 summit in Charlevoix, Quebec, and there's an ambitious agenda on the table for the leaders of Canada, the US, the UK, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. There are also several other leaders who have been invited to attend, including the head of the European Union, the leaders of Ukraine, Mexico, Brazil, and controversially, Narendra Modi from India and Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. So what will actually be achieved at this summit? Will President Trump cause any chaos? And was it a mistake for Prime Minister Carney to invite Modi, given the RCMP is investigating the alleged ties of the Indian government to the murder of a Sikh activist and other acts of violence on Canadian soil? I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and today on The Big Story, I'm speaking with John Kirton, the University of Toronto Professor Emeritus and the head of the G7 Research Group, a global network that's based out of the U of T. He's been to almost every G7 since 1988. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good to be with you and your listeners and viewers and readers.
You're no rookie to G7 summits since you've been to so many of them. Why don't we start off with some of the basics for our listeners? How much of a massive logistical and security struggle is it to put something like this on?
It can certainly be a challenge. It requires a very careful preparation, at least a year or two in advance. And from the moment, and even before, the host each year actually chooses the summit site and the time it will be held. The great advantage for the Canadian host this year is they've done it before at Kananaskis. That was in 2002, and it worked extremely well. And some of the infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, the planning infrastructure is still in place. So it's much less expensive and a much more secure than it otherwise would have been.
So the Department of Foreign Affairs and RCMP just dusted off those old plans and saw what they needed to upgrade, and that was essentially it?
Pretty much, yeah. Now, at Kananaskis, it's a long time since 2002, so there's a few more roads and trails up the mountain nearby, and they have to be secured more than they were before. And of course, one of the things that's changed is we didn't have drones back then in a serious way like we do now. So rather than defending the skies from hijacked civilian airliners by the Al Qaeda network that are destined to just dive into the room the leaders are meeting and killing them all at once. That was a great fear back in 2002. You've got to worry about drones, as our Ukrainian friends know all too well.
Yeah, and the RCMP, of course, has their own drones, and I'm sure, is there a military component as well to the security around the G7 site, given these are foreign dignitaries who are visiting our country?
Oh, very much so. And one of the great advantages of Kananaskis, it's pretty close to a Cold Lake, Alberta, right? From which our CF-18s fly. So they can hover in the air much longer at less expense over Kananaskis than if they had to fly in from afar. It's also a talking point for American friends, pretty close to their air interception assets in the USA. So should we need a hand, as well, they did and we did on 9/11, right? We could always call in our NORAD comrades, partners, to back us up as need might be. We didn't have to at Kananaskis one, but who knows these days.
Yeah, and I'm sure the U.S. military will be very interested in protecting President Donald Trump. But we'll talk a little bit more about Trump and some of the tensions and drama that could happen at the summit a little bit later. But on the basics itself, with this meeting, what are the main goals that have been expressed by the G7 leaders? And what do you believe actually will be achieved when they sit down at the table to try and hash out some new deals?
Well, it's a big, broad list of priorities. So very ambitious, given the challenges of our times. So the first is security, support for Ukraine, sanctions against Russia, then fighting against transnational repression and foreign interference, fighting wildfires, pretty much in the eyes and lungs, as well as in the mind of so many Canadians and even Americans today. Then there's energy security with critical mineral supply chains at the core. And then we move on to other issues: artificial intelligence, quantum computing, as the technological revolution unfolds. And then, of course, migration is destined to come up. And I think so will trade and tariffs, certainly, and even financial fragility, right? Given the way the uh, markets are reacting to Donald Trump's tariffs, his big, beautiful budget. I'm quoting him and other things in the global economy now.
Out of all of those broad themes that they're hoping to take action on, which ones do you think will actually see action? And will it be substantial action, or, some of those broad agreements to continue working on XYZ?
I think most of them will see substantial, indeed, some significant advances, even a few strong advances. So overall, I think we'll see a significant performance from Kananaskis. Ukraine, the clearest present danger. So stronger support for Ukraine, stronger sanctions on Russia. So more than before, not just more than the same on that one. I think we'll see steps forward on transnational repression, foreign interference. But wildfires will be the big, brand new one. Almost never before have G7 summits made any commitments on wildfires But I suspect here there'll be a lot, maybe even a separate communique agreed to by all, because, of course, although they might not say it in the communique, that clearly is fueled by climate change, which is certain to get worse in coming years. And they know that the damage has already arrived. So it's those top ones that I'm looking for the greatest advances on.
Now, on Russia's war with Ukraine, I mean, Zelensky will be at the table. You're expecting some big progress on that front, but how much will it make a difference when Russia doesn't seem to be backing down in any way and doesn't appear to be interested too much in the peace talks that are underway?
Russia has a gross domestic product about the same size as Canada alone. So when you add in all of our European partners in NATO, we have vast superiority in capability. So they simply cannot win in the long run. And then add in the support that the U.S. is now providing, will continue to provide. It is a one-way street. The only question is how long it's going to take, probably sooner than many think. Then we have to turn to, as the G7 already has, how do we help Ukraine rebuild and reconstruct, right? So I think that will be the subject of commitments there. But first, we've got to give Ukraine more money to support its budget. We've got to give them more military equipment, and that's already rolling in primarily from the European G7 members right next door to Ukraine. We've got to strengthen the sanctions so Russia can no longer sell its oil, which it needs to support 1/3 of its overall government budget, and no more Russian sales of natural gas, even perhaps uranium too. So energy will be front and center, I think, to the sanctions that are imposed.
More on the big story with John Kirton, the head of the G7 Research Group, in just a moment when we'll talk about some of the controversial guests arriving in Alberta. I want to talk about some of the controversies or controversial leaders that will be at this G7 summit now. Before we move on to India and Saudi Arabia, I do want to talk about President Donald Trump. It was back in 2018 at the G7 in Charlevoix, where he decided, as he was flying out on Air Force One, to pull out of the joint communique, something that upset a lot of people. Do you expect a different Donald Trump at the table this time around, or is that unpredictability still a massive risk for the Carney government?
Yeah, he's both predictably unpredictable or unpredictably predictable, but it's not a great unknown anymore. At Charlevoix, of course, he did well at the summit itself. It was only after he left and he saw on his TV that Justin Trudeau was getting all the credit, and that, of course, he sent his famous tweet, which was incompletely implemented by U.S. government officials still on site and anywhere in the coming year. This time, Mark Carney is not going to hog the limelight and say it's all about me and I did everything, because Prime Minister Carney is just not that kind of a guy. He is going to give sufficient credit to Donald Trump for all of the genuine things at the Kananaskis summit on which Donald Trump has led, and which all G7 leaders have agreed, and that matter a lot. And there's a lot in that category. We will commit to continue our fiscal stimulus, tax cuts, more government spending, including on defense, to foster a growth in our economies. That's number one. We will agree to control artificial intelligence on the internet so it doesn't produce and fuel child pornography, which kills our kids. Donald Trump and Melania just did that in the States. So very easy for the G7 to agree on that. And there's many more in that category, especially on China, right? We don't like China exporting deadly opioids and fentanyl into our countries. They kill about, hundreds of Canadians, right? Every month still. So it's a big problem here, not just one that was born in the USA. So I think there's a lot that they can easily agree on. And I think the Canadian hosts will start with that and get the ball rolling, right? And then perhaps leave some of the most controversial issues of the tariffs and trades to separate bilateral, trilateral meetings on the sidelines.
Yeah, and I was going to say those talks could happen on the sidelines, especially with Mexico's leader being there as well, Claudia Sheinbaum, given that the three leaders of the North American Trade Pact, CUSMA, USMCA, however you want to call it, will be at the summit site together.
That's right, and I do suspect we could see a trilateral sideline meeting of the three Cosmos Canadian partners. And if it all goes well, they could at the end all agree that they will use the existing CUSMA as the basis for improving it, as they're destined to do by next year, but also improving it in ways that help contain or control, even move towards a partial solution, at least, of the current trade wars, which Donald Trump has initiated against both of his partners, Canada and Mexico, too.
Now, one of the main controversies about this G7 summit is the decision by Prime Minister Mark Carney, and domestic controversy, to invite India's Narendra Modi and Saudi Arabia's Mohammed bin Salman to join the G7 summit when there are clear concerns around human rights, especially with Modi, given that the RCMP has alleged that agents of the Indian government are responsible or allegedly responsible for the assassination of a Sikh activist in BC, as well as a campaign of violence and coercion across the country. Do you think it was the right move for Carney to invite Modi to the table, or should Canada have taken a stand here, especially since foreign interference is a conversation at the table, to have not invited him to send a message about that kind of behavior?
Oh, certainly the right decision to invite Modi. If you look at all of the guest country leaders, they're all the biggest democracies from both the global north, Australia, South Korea, and the global south. So Modi, Lula, and Ramaphosa of South Africa, too. And all of them have recently hosted the G20 summits, which Ramaphosa will do in November. I've long thought that India should be a full member of the G7. There's only two criteria you have to meet. You have to be a major power. You have to be a democracy. India was a democracy since 1948, ever since it became an independent country. And it is now a major power, an economic power, certainly even a major military power. and on key things, public digital infrastructure, for example. And all of this is vastly more important than the ongoing bilateral dispute between the Canadian government and the Indian government about Indian government involvement in a death on Canadian soil of a Canadian citizen who was supporting separation of a part of India. And that is already being dealt with between Canada and India from the highest level through a process where they're jointly seeking the evidence and will come to a conclusion about what to do when it's all in.
Does it not appear to be a contradiction, though, when Canada has a reputation for standing up for human rights around the world, and yet we invite leaders who have been accused of clear violations of that?
Sure, because we don't live in a perfect world. The G7 certainly is devoted to protect human rights within its members and to promote it globally. So this does give Mr. Carney a chance to say, do you agree with that core value, my fellow Democratic leader? And will you agree, at least to me, don't do it again and act to stop it from being done from any member of your government. So it's a chance to get the message to him at the highest level, face to face, and see if, without admitting any culpability, perhaps for sins in the past, he'll agree not to do it again, and that will be a win.
All right, we've gone over time, so I'll end it there. I want to thank you so much for your thoughts on all of this, John. I appreciate it.
Okay, good talking to you.
That was John Kirton, a University of Toronto professor emeritus and the head of the G7 research group, speaking with me about what to expect out of the G7 summit that begins this weekend in Alberta. You can catch all of the coverage on City News and your local news radio stations across Canada. I'm Cormac Mac Sweeney, and that was The Big Story. You can send us your feedback on this episode or any other episode by emailing us at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca or leave a voicemail at 416-935-5935. You can find us on the Seeker app or on all your favorite podcast players. Please rate, review, follow, and share. Thanks for listening.